Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, this session I'm going to be able to talk to you about the line types, the different line types. Remember, we said in the previous session that you have words and that word is saying something. You can't just abruptly throw words into a line and say that's going to make sense. And the same with line qualities and line types that you get. You have to work with those line types, saying I want this to you to understand that this will be standing out. This is the outside of the drawing, or this is hidden detail, or this is the center of the drawing, or whatever the case might be. Now, this is your introduction to engineering, graphics and design. This is grade 10 level, but you will use this for grade 11 as well as for grade 12 throughout your career of engineering, graphics and design. So what I want to point out to you is the fact that line quality and what you will see in the next few moments on the screen is very important. Now, of course, if you go to the different line types, you will see on the screen there points out to you that type A lines, type B and type C lines. Now, you maybe can recall a dash line and it doesn't fit in there. How not? I'm not talking about the types of lines in terms of what does it express, but I'm talking about here the quality and the thickness of a line. Now, of course, if you take a look at those lines for the slides per se, these slides I've prepared for you. The darker lines, the black lines will indicate something, the blue lines will indicate something, and the green lines will indicate something. Now, if you go to the different types of lines to express something easier, it's important that more important objects will be shown darker, and then of course the less important will be lighter. Your type A lines will be with a pencil, will be a dark line. So in other words, that's where you're going to press very hard on your pencil, not very hard I'm saying, but harder on your pencil. That's your dark lines, that's going to be your A lines. But in ink, black is black, so we can't have a light black and a darker black in terms of the gray schedules that we do have, because if you print the lines, it should still be visible. So if I go a gray, very light gray like line that I'm going to draw with ink, it means that it might disappear the moment it starts to print out. So therefore we will work of thickness in lines, right? So a very thick line will be a line or dark line in pencil. Those lines will be the borders of your drawing. That will be a dark line, that's emphasizing the end of this work area. And then also a title block will be also in type A lines, dark lines in other words. Those are the title blocks that you can get. We'll get to that detail just now. And then the outlines of visible parts and outlines of a drawing, outlines of a object in other words, that will be also a dark line. And then if you go to next year's work, the content of civil drawings, you will see that shearage lines, plumbing lines, water pipes and drainage, that will be as a dark line. And then you get your type B and your type C lines. Now again, like I said, in this case, with the purpose of the slides itself, it will be blue lines for the B type of lines, or type B lines, and the type C lines will be green lines. That's also a bit less important, but not as important as the outside lines. And in ink, that will be a bit thinner than what it will be of the type A lines. All right, so you will be seeing it as a less thicker line. All right, now type B lines will be indicated by center lines. Now remember, I showed you the three different colors, the black, the blue and the green line. Now with the blue lines, those are medium type of lines, or type medium lines that you can see, the type B lines in other words. Now a center line, a center pointing out the center of the circle, that will be type B. That's not as important, but it is also important to know where to put my compass, where is the distance from the center outwards, or whatever the case might be. Center lines can also be used to point out the center of axis. In other words, should I spin this hexagonal prism, it will be exactly at that specific point where the center line is horizontally drawn. That will make that this will spin around without wobbling in the process. So that's basically the point of axis, or the point of center. And then also the point of symmetry. If one part looks the same as the other part, that means that you will be indicated by a type B line, which is a center line. And then there's also something that you can take note of something that you never knew before, I believe. That is when something is symmetric. In other words, the upper part looks exactly the same as the bottom part. Then you can keep the center line and just draw 2 lines at the ends of others on either side of the drawing, and that is indicating, or that symbol that you see over there is indicating that the drawing actually carries on to the bottom. So in other words, if you run out of time and there's a lot of work still there to draw, and the upper part looks exactly the same as the bottom part, you can, in other words, do only the upper part, only if it's symmetric exactly the same. Then you can add the symbol of symmetry, and then you can keep it there. But that's also type B lines that you will use for that. And then also, when will you use a type B line for a center line? That will be if you point out the rotation of a crank, for instance. Now if you see this part over here, this is the handle, it will start rotating around this axis part over here, and that is basically indicating to you how this will run as it's basically rotating around the center point. So now that line, can you see it's not a solid circle that's been drawn in there, it's a center line, and that center line is a type B line, and it's pointing out to you the track that the end point of this crank will move as it's progressing from that point. How do we draw center lines? That's basically a line of 25 millimeters, a gap of there in the vicinity of 4 millimeters, a line of 4, a gap of 4, and a 25 or 20 to 25 millimeter line again. And so you carry on. You will always end up with a long line if you should draw a center line at all times. You can't stop with a short line, you have to with a short dash, you have to end up with the long dash, in other words of 20 millimeters. And then also type B lines will be lettering for name blocks, all different types of lettering, doesn't matter, it's not going to be exactly dark as what you're emphasizing, something like the outer lines of a drawing. It's only for sub-importance, in other words. And then also auxiliary views. Should you need an auxiliary view to be drawn in this area over here to indicate what's the distance over there and what's the distance on that side of the hexagon, you can't draw this part over here without the auxiliary view, and that's, in that case, you have to draw and have to show this portion over here. Right, and that will be the type B lines. Then also a cut line. A cut line is like this line over here on solid geometry, is a solid line, and you name it AA, or it's just been cut at this point itself. From there on, you can also see with mechanical drawings that the cut line differ from civil drawings. Now with the mechanical drawing, it's a center line, and of course the center line has got darker ends and arrows and everything that attached towards that part. I will go through the detail of center lines. Now cutting planes or cutting lines, that we can say, is also again a medium chain line like we have with the center lines. Always end up with the long lines, as in the case of center lines. You'll always emphasize the end point of the cutting plane. The ends will be a darker end for a darker point or type A line, and then of course you will have a little bit of a bigger arrow onto the end, and then you will have your tail part, which is also a type B line that you will draw up to the end, and of course you will name it AA, and of course if you have to name the drawing, it will be cutting or section drawing on AA, for instance. Then if you go to civil drawings, that's also a term for content that you will do later on. If you do the civil drawings, ladies and gentlemen, if you cut through this wall, in other words, through the soil, through the wall, up to the top, you will have to show the detail of this part. Now, of course, you can see that all the hatching has been pointed out to you in different areas. I'll get to that later on again. But now for this, the cutting line is different. So there's actually now the third type of cut line or cutting planes that you can get. That was mechanical drawing, which is a center line with darker ends on either side, of which I've explained to you just now. Then with solid geometry, it's simply just a solid line. Now with civil drawings, it has got a little arrow there pointing into you the direction of which you're going to cut. So in other words, this wall has been cut off there, and I'm looking towards that direction. The arrow is pointing to me the direction, and this is the detail of what I will see. Forget about the detail over here with the hatching, we'll get to that. I just want to point now, my focus is now to the cut line that you will see over here, and the cut line that looks different. So that's the third type of cut line that you can get in drawings. Alright, so now in that case it's a solid line. It points out arrows, and of course it points out to you the direction, the remaining portion of in which I will look for the arrows itself. Then your cutting planes, this is for solid geometry we set, and then of course with solid geometry it's just a simple straight line, no arrows, no funny things like tail parts of arrows or anything like that. So that is for hatch lines for mechanical drawings. Now this is the hatch lines that you can see. With a hatch line, with the hatching itself, it points out to you something differently. In other words, you will see that soil, normal ground, in other words, the soil has been pointed out to you in this case, like these diagonal lines pointing into different directions. Then you got your concrete, we will get to the detail of that. There's also a concrete slab. This is hardcore filling, it looks different towards the rest of the hatching. And then also your bricklaying, your bricks will be cut into different areas depending on what bricks that you've been used. Alright, so that's your hatch lines. That is also type B line. And then with this portion over here, it points out to you the hatching of a solid geometry. That is also being pointed out to you in that regard. Then also with screw threads, we're not really there, but that's what we will get to grade 11 content, how to show the screw thread. Then also fault lines, where in other words that was made out of a piece of plate. It's been bent to those ends to make a hexagon, to make a pentagon, to make a octagon, or whatever the case might be, in this case a hexagon. And those bent points will be pointed out to you as type B lines. Then also your break lines, break of continuity. In actual fact, this building carries on to the right and it carries on to the left, it carries on upwards. For grade 10 level, we only need this portion over here, and we have got the break of continuity lines, which is those, it looks like a lightning being struck downwards or something like that. So that's basically the break of continuity line, the break lines in other words. Then also your bolt lines, also content that for grade 11, that is also pointed out to you as a type B line. Your division between front view, left view and top view and right view can be seen as your axis, and it's also going to be type B. Can you see it's not as important as what the final drawing looks like? Black, blue, and also the projection lines green. It's been pointed out to you in this case. Alright, then also hidden detail, also not as important, but it is important to show. In that case, your hidden detail lines will be basically type B lines that you see over there. Alright, now for everything that you're going to remove, in other words, you break down the wall, you build a door inside there, and then from there on it shows that once there was a wall, the wall has been broken off, there's a door now, so that is not as important anymore. So we take that out and we replace that by an opening, and then of course we do have got your door swing and the door and the walls itself as dark lines. Right. For your hidden detail lines, like in the case of the center lines, the short dash will be there in the vicinity of 4 millimeters plus minus, and also the gap will also be there in the vicinity of 4 millimeters. Alright, so that is pointed out to you as a thin dash line, a type B line, not as important. When you do contour lines, grade 11 and grade 12, more this specifically grade 12 content, you will do the contour lines as a longer line, and those lines will be more or less 7 millimeters in length and 7 millimeters in gaps. So since it's going to take up a vast area in the process. Alright, so we have had type A lines, we have had type B lines, not as important, and then now the construction lines. These are type C lines. Now the type C lines, ladies and gentlemen, is actually pointing out to you only the method to get to the end result. Alright, so it's not the real method, it's not the real drawing, it's not the final drawing, it's just the method in getting there. So that will help you in constructing the final product, in other words. Alright, so I used to say it's, if you built an office, you're going to use inside a classroom, for instance, you're going to use a wheelbarrow, you're going to use a spade for mixing concrete, you're going to use water and a hose pipe and all those type of things. These things are those things that will help you. In other words, the green lines, the process to get to the end result. Once the owner gets back to the classroom, he only wants to see the final product. He doesn't want to see the wheelbarrows and the house pipes and all those type of things. He wants to see the final product. So in other words, these green lines should not be emphasizing as important as what it is in that case. So let's say, for instance, we have to construct an angle. Those are construction lines that we will use in order to find the angle. That will be, in other words, type C lines. If we project from the front view to the left view, front view to the right view, front view to the top view, we will use those projection lines as a very light line. I used to say you use the wet of the pencil in order to draw those lines. If you keep your paper about a meter or an arm length away from you, you shouldn't really see the projection lines. It should be very light lines in that regard. Alright, so and then of course if you have to annotate something, you will draw guidelines, and those guidelines will also be, in this case, type C lines, which is very light, just to make sure that you draw and that you will write in a straight line and not larger letters and smaller letters in the process. Right. Then if you go to frames and title blocks, there's also something, and again, it's grade 10, 11 and 12, you're going to deal with this, you're going to work with this. There are two different name blocks. You get a civil name block for civil drawings. Now I can maybe explain to you, civil drawings are those drawings that you will maybe use for concrete, used to emphasize the house, used to indicate some depth of the house itself. Those are civil drawings. And then you get mechanical drawings. Now I believe you can make your conclusions. Those are all machine-like or type of drawings, machine parts that's been drawn, the profile of cams and those type of things. So those are mechanical drawings itself. Right. So if you take a look at the civil name block, the civil name block will extend upwards, vertical upwards. In other words, it goes up to the top. So all the information you will pile up on the right hand side of the page for that. Alright, so if you go to a proper civil name block, it has got there in the vicinity of 13 components that has to be there. So you have to put in all those components and you pile it up vertically upwards to the top. And that's the civil name block that you can get. With mechanical drawings, it will extend horizontally to the left and right of your bottom of your page. So here you can see that the name block has been extended to the left with all the detail of it, and of course you can also add some more detail should you need some notes, should you need to say what is the project and who's the draftsman and all those type of information that you can get. Right, so that is with mechanical name blocks. Civil, vertical, horizontal for mechanical name blocks. How to prepare a mechanical name block? In other words, you're going to get a clean piece of paper like this one that's framed out on the screen, and on that page you have to draw a frame. So how are you going to draw the frame? Normally the measurements for an A3 page will be 15 millimeters from the side and downwards, and to the side and upwards on the bottom. Now of course we have to get dots or spaces that will be extending us and telling us that's going to be 15 millimeters downwards. Alright, so why 15 millimeters? Simply because of the fact that it will give you sufficient space to draw in. And then also if you punch holes on the side so that you can still see the drawing which has not been punched in the process, so that drawing doesn't extend too close to the side of the paper itself. Alright, so that's basically where you get your dots, 15 millimeters from the corners. Once you've got your dots, you can simply join those lines. Remember now, joining those lines will be type A lines, because that's your end result. There we go with the darker lines. That's emphasizing the end of the page in terms of the working area. Then we can measure and do the dimensions. If it's, say for instance, a civil name block, and extend the lines vertical upwards. Remember, this is also type A lines, so therefore that's going to be dark at all times. And then we will have some guidelines, of course, for the lettering, and also divisions of smaller portions. There's the guidelines, and then we can write in between those guidelines itself. The lettering that we will use is normally for engineering sans 10 11.1 and 10.143. So those are the guidelines from South African national standards, by saying if we draw annotations we will use these codes, and if we draw symbols we will use these as symbols for a toilet, for a wash basin, for a spring, for a bearing, or whatever the case might be. Alright, so in this case we're going to use Gothic printing. It's letters standing up straight. The wider the better the letter, simply because of the fact that it looks much more impressive. And you will use the guidelines at all times and draw between the guidelines, and we will always use uppercase for annotation unless the examiner is stating something else for us. Right, so in this case we will use uppercase annotation. And if we draw, say for instance, an A, it's going to be, like I said, a wide letter and it's standing up straight. The same with beads, as extending horizontally before we start with the curves. The C is also to a great extent a wide letter, and the same with G, for instance, with a J, with K, with P, as well as Y, and so on. So therefore there's different ways in which we can draw lettering and printing itself. Right, so there we go with the frame now, and we've got the guidelines in there. So therefore we're going to do the guidelines in type B lines. You will see that, and then there might be some smaller, that the heading is much bigger, but the rest of the lettering can be smaller if we do it that way itself. Right, and of course we're not going to write down the word date. We're going to put today's date at the area where that is, and not task number, but it's task number so and so on page so and so. So therefore, and also the grade itself. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the portion of line quality and line work. I really want you to focus on this part over here, because with that you need to know the exact sizes, you need to know the correct quality of lines. Otherwise, up till grade 12, you're going to really struggle in finding the good quality of drawings that you need for engineering, graphics and design. And like I used to say, if you buy a car and the car is full of scratches and dents and all those type of things, then you're not going to be very interested in that. And the same with drawings. The paper should be neat, your line quality should be of good quality, and then of course there shouldn't be excess lines that's smearing up or maybe wasting the neatness of the drawing itself. So therefore keep in mind that neat drawings always give a good impression for the marker that's going to give you the work or the mark on at the end of the term itself. So yeah, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you for paying attention towards the line qualities, because it's important for a kick-off for all your drawings that you will draw from now further onwards. And I trust and hope that this helped you a lot. Thank you very much.